Hello, welcome. We'll get started in just a second. We'll give people a few minutes to log in. Sometimes they love to register. I'll give you some instructions here soon on what you're actually up to. A few more people are logging in. That's great. I know it's a sunny evening, so I was hoping people weren't. But you could be sitting outside and listening to this. That's perfectly fine. Don't worry, I can't see you. I can't hear you. You don't have to worry about being muted or if you're in your pajamas. Okay. All right. Give people just a couple more minutes. So get a snack if you need it. All right, I'm excited a few of you are joining me this evening. I know it seems really early to maybe be thinking about this, and in this year, probably the last thing you want to do is jump back into Zoom land now that you don't have to do this quite as often. But we are gonna spend some time talking about just things you can start thinking about right now. I'm gonna take some time to define some terms, so it should be pretty low-key. Hopefully you'll leave this with more answers, but also just feeling better about getting started. All right. For those of you that are joining me, if you came in after I said this is a Zoom webinar, so it means I can't see you, I can't hear you, you can't even like press a button that would make that happen, so you don't have to worry about it. There is a way to communicate with me, and it's in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, or the question and answer box. You can actually write questions in there and I will see them. Sometimes it's hard for me to present and look at the questions at the same time, so I will take little pauses here or there, and definitely at the end, there'll be plenty of time for questions. So that's how this works. So know that that box is down at the bottom. All right, we'll get started on this lovely Monday night. My name is Melody Ferguson. I'm the Associate Dean of Admission at Pacific Lutheran University. I'm not here to talk about PLU, so don't worry, you're in the right place, whether you want to learn about PLU or not. We're just going to talk about what it says on the screen, kind of how to start this college search, because kind of you want to hit the ground running in your senior year, hopefully if you're here. And so whether you're a freshman or sophomore or junior, and you're here to kind of learn a little bit more, hopefully that'll help you hit the ground running. To give you a little background on myself and why I'm excited to share with you about this process, I'm gonna switch the screen if it'll work. There we go. So I'm gonna think back to my own college experience, which is longer ago than I like to admit. But I went to Federal Way High School, so not too far from here. I was a first-generation college student, so it meant that my parents had not gone to school, had gone to college. I was going to be the first in my family to do that. They were super supportive, but they had no idea how to help me get there. And so one of the things that I did that I wouldn't recommend to you is I just applied everywhere my friends applied, because the internet didn't exist really in the same way it does now. And so I couldn't just Google things or compare them online. I only got, some certain brochures in the mail. I only knew about certain colleges. So my friends who had parents who were more maybe worldly than mine, they helped me navigate this, but I just applied where they recommended or where they were applying. I remember going to a college fair. It looked something like this top photo. Gosh, I don't know if those will ever happen again. But it was so overwhelming. I walked in and there were so many colleges and I didn't know how to sort them. I didn't know how to organize them in my brain. I would walk up to the tables and they'd ask me, like, do you have any questions? I had no questions. I probably had a million questions, but I just didn't know what to ask. And so it was really overwhelming. So I ended up applying to about 5 colleges. I couldn't tell you all of them at this point, but I remember one was Pepperdine University. I knew nothing about Pepperdine University. I didn't know if I had my major. I didn't know if I'd fit in there. I didn't know what size it was. I didn't know how much it costs. But wow, it's really beautiful. And so I applied there because of pretty pictures. And then I applied to University of Washington also. A lot of my friends were applying there. It was the state school I had heard of. I saw it on television. So I applied there as well as a couple other state schools. I got into most of the colleges I applied to. We'll talk about how that's pretty normal, more normal than you think it is. And ended up deciding I couldn't afford Pepperdine. And also I found that it actually wasn't a good fit for me once I started listening to some information sessions and learning a bit more. But University of Washington, I went on a college tour. We'll talk about the importance of that, and really felt like it was a place that would challenge me. I'm somebody who is very kind of self-directed. I'm a pretty competitive person. I wanted that type of environment. So that was where I ended up and spent 4 years. So one of the reasons I love giving this presentation is I'm hoping to impart in you a few things that I wish I knew. It's one of the reasons I love the job that I do. I get to help people like myself all the time, but I also get to kind of share these little nuggets. I also love working with the Sumner-Bonney Lake School District because this is where I live. I live in Bonney Lake. My kids go to Mountain View Middle School right now. I will have a son at Bonney Lake High School next year, which is crazy to me. So I love being able to also share with those people in the community so that hopefully we can stay connected through your time in your high school experience. So you'll see me around, hopefully physically next year, not just in Zoom. So we're going to start by talking, we're not going to dive deep into anything today. This is a very much an overview. We're going to try to keep it a little broad. Don't worry, your counselors and I have some plans for September to go a little deeper into some of these topics. We're going to start with this idea of there's different types of colleges. And I think that's one of those things that I didn't even know when I started, like what do they mean by 4-year college? What do they mean by bachelor's degree? I didn't know what those terms meant. And so I didn't really know that I was applying to a private school and a public school, for example. Those terms didn't mean anything to me. So we're going to talk a little bit about the differences between community and technical colleges, public universities, private universities, and even some other types of options. So if you can kind of briefly at least be able to understand what they are, and when someone says those words to you, you can know a little bit more than I did. So community and technical colleges, these are designed for a lot of reasons. And I think sometimes people have a misunderstanding about a community college or a technical college, that it's, where people go who can't get into a 4-year college. And that's not the case. Community and technical colleges are designed for people who are pursuing specific types of degrees or who want a different type of start to their kind of 4-year or bachelor's degree, as we'll talk about. So it's really designed just for different people who are in different situations, or it's something maybe that fits you a little bit better, and we'll talk about how to figure that out. There are careers that don't require you to go to a university. Things like being an auto mechanic or a hairdresser, or even sometimes types of nursing, types of preschool educators, those kind of things might just require a certificate or a shorter degree. And so you would want to go to a community college to be like a radiology technician or something like that. Those degrees don't actually exist at a 4-year university like Pacific Lutheran University or University of Washington. So you would need to go to a community college or a technical college. For some students, high school wasn't their favorite, and maybe they didn't do as well in school. We know in this kind of global pandemic, that's really affected people's grades, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. And so depending on kind of where you're at with your GPA or what math level you're in or what English level you're in, yes, it can be a place to kind of start, because it's a really great option for students that need to kind of run into college level math or something like that. You have a 4.0 on the first day of college. So it's nice because the community college can let you kind of press that refresh button and start over, but still pursue going into medical school or going into dental school or being a lawyer or being a social worker, something that would require that 4-year degree. So community colleges are a lot of things to a lot of people, which actually can make it quite confusing. Some people think of them as small, and they're not. They're actually some of the biggest colleges in the state of Washington. We have some with over 10,000 students attending them here. So they're sometimes a lot bigger than you think. They are often more affordable than a lot of other colleges and universities. They don't give out a lot of scholarships. They do give out financial aid, and in a session later, we'll talk about the differences between those. but they are kind of cheaper just up front. So for some people, it's a financial reason to choose these. What's kind of interesting about community and technical colleges is there's like one in every community or two. So there's a lot of them. This is the largest grouping of types of schools that we offer here in Washington. I think there's 33 of them, if I looked at this map right. So it's a lot of community and technical colleges to choose from. They tend to serve their community, so most people do go to the one that's in their community. But some of them do have very specific programs. For example, Moses Lake, number 4. It has a program if you want to become a pilot. It's really unique to that program, that school. And they work with Central Washington also, which also has some pilot training as well. So they're schools with very niche programs. And then some of them have residence halls. You can actually live on a community college campus. Some are a little bit more traditional. Green River is one in this area that does that. So that's just a little bit about community and technical colleges. And feel free, again, there's a Q&A box at the bottom. You can put your questions in there. I may not answer them right away, but I will get to all of them. For some students, they are looking for that 4-year university, that public or private school. We'll talk about the differences between those in a second, but that bachelor's degree. They want to get that degree, that kind of more traditional college education. And they don't want to stay in Washington. So sometimes this is a question I get from families. How do I make going out of state more affordable? How do I research schools from out of state? How do I decide if that's the right fit for me? You should know there are some schools that participate in something called the Western Undergraduate Exchange. I believe in June, a lot of you are going to get to go to some sessions with some of my colleagues at other campuses. And some of them will talk about what we call the WUI, which is a really fun thing to say. And that can make out-of-state tuition a little bit more inexpensive so that you're not paying that price. It's basically a scholarship. It's not every school in those states. And some of them do have requirements, specific GPAs, majors. For some, they are competitive. So it's not like it's a guarantee, but it's a nice option. So for those of you looking like, really, I want to go to Arizona, I want some sunshine. Maybe that's a thing to look at. If you also want to leave the state of Washington, private schools, so Pacific Lutheran University is considered a private school. We don't receive state funding. That's basically what it means. And so that means our tuition is the same for in and out of state students. So there's no difference. So if you're looking to go to school in Oregon, for example, University of Portland is a private school. So they have one tuition. Doesn't matter if you live there or don't live there, and they would give out scholarships to help make that tuition more affordable. So considering private schools is another way to look out of state, but not have to pay that out of state tuition, which can sometimes be a little bit more expensive. And the reason for that is like University of Washington is funded by the state of Washington, partly by you as a taxpayer. And so they give a discount on their tuition to state residents. And so the students coming from out of state pay more because they haven't been contributing to that school's funding. You hear the word private school or independent school sometimes, and I just talked about how that means basically just means we don't get state funding. So there's one tuition. I listed a bunch of schools that would fit into this category. You'll see some are maybe more traditional types of schools like Seattle University or Gonzaga. Some are very kind of niche schools. Cornish, for example, is an art school, a school of performing arts. So they are a very specific kind of niche type of school. So private schools would be art schools, but they'd also be very traditional in kind of, you know, what you're used to seeing. Sometimes people make assumptions about private school that they're all really small. And that's not the case. These are very kind of different in shape and size. PLU, we have about 2,700 undergraduate students. That's that first degree, those first 4 years. We sometimes say undergraduate or bachelor's degree. Seattle U has closer to 9,000 students. So that's a really big difference in size and shape. These are the ones that a lot of times you think, oh my goodness, that's way too expensive because we have a very expensive looking sticker price or tuition. If you Google us, the tuition looks really expensive. But private schools are allowed to give out scholarships in a lot of ways because they don't have some of those state restrictions. And so they're allowed to give out merit. So it's based on GPA or talent. Athletic scholarships also exist at private or independent colleges. Again, not all of them, but some of them. They give out need-based scholarships based on family income. If you signed up for a college-bound in middle school, they would also apply at ones in Washington State. Sometimes they use what's called a weighted GPA, and we'll talk a lot more about this in the fall when we talk about the college application. But this is where they consider your AP or IB classes and actually bump your GPA up, which can help you get scholarships. And then some do have a very specific culture or feel because they might be a little bit smaller, and so they have kind of a vibe to them. So definitely visiting these schools is really important. And we'll talk about figuring out what's important to you. That's going to be really important as you consider these kind of smaller communities, but they're very, very focused on your education. That's kind of what private or independent colleges are known for. So these are just some of the things to consider. So if you're really excited about one of these types of schools, don't get sticker shock, as I said, because you can apply and see what types of scholarship opportunities you get. And I will help you out with that as well as we navigate this. Public colleges or universities. So these are University of Washington, Washington State University, Central Washington University, Eastern Washington University, Western Washington University, and the Evergreen State College. There are public colleges that are out of state, but again, you're not going to get that state, discounts. You're not a resident there. So these are your state colleges. These tuition can be very affordable, especially for such high quality education that these schools give you in this state. They give out a lot more in need-based scholarships, which is based on household income, than they give in merit-based scholarships, primarily kind of GPA and leadership, those kind of things. So especially for students that are afraid about, can I afford a school? All of these could be an option for you. But public colleges are really built for that, for sure. And then, these schools all have different feels, and it really sometimes has to do with where they're located. So like geographically, what type of environment do you want? Some of these are more college towns, some of these are more rural, some are more urban. So they really do span the state of Washington, which is really great. Some of these schools have lots of graduate students on them. So those are students pursuing their kind of next degree or like a professional degree, like a law degree or a medical degree. So sometimes your courses are taught by students in those programs. That can be both good and bad. So it's really, again, about your learning style. This is a map that's kind of hard to see because there's so many layered on top of themselves. But I thought it was interesting just to see that, again, much like those community colleges, you have a ton of choices that really do showcase all of Washington. And this doesn't even have all of them on there because it doesn't have like UW-Tacoma or WSU Vancouver, for example. So it was just the best one I could find. All right, so I just went over kind of types of schools, which to me, if I were sitting through this presentation, would already make me feel like, oh, that's a lot to think about. And we were only talking about really Washington State and a few other states. So when you think about looking across the nation and how many schools are available to you across the world, really, you can go to school in lots of places. It can really get overwhelming. I think it's great that you have the internet at your fingertips to search for schools, but it almost gives you too many options. So how do you narrow down those choices? Well, I think the thing that I want, if you're going to do any kind of reflection this spring or this summer, is to think about what actually matters to you. Don't think about the schools. Don't even think about college. But when you think about your future, when you think about your college experience, not necessarily the place you're going to, when you think about what you want to be when you grow up, or if you don't know what job, just what type of adult you want to be, start to think about what matters to you. So a big, important question is, what's your learning style? How do you learn best? What classes are you successful in right now? What type of teachers have really inspired you or made it easy for you to learn? Are you a visual learner? Are you an auditory learner? Do you learn with your hands? Like, really start to think about, what excites you when you go to school, because that might actually translate to a type of college or university or type of school, right? Small schools are going to have more discussion style learning. The large schools are going to have more kind of lectures or visuals. Technical colleges are going to be more hands-on. So it's going to help you think about where you're going to be most successful, which is another thing I want you to consider. You know, who's going to support you to success? What are your goals and aspirations? Is there a dream job? Is there a school that you really want to go to eventually? You know, you want to make sure a school can support those goals and aspirations. You can actually see your likelihood of being accepted. So you can actually like type in your GPA and you can see, you know, what's your likelihood that that school would take you, would say yes to you. And I'll show you where you can find that in a second. For some students, the location matters. For some, it doesn't. Do you want close to home, far away from home? Do you want to live in more of a rural environment? Do you like the idea of living in a city? You know, a residential community? What do you want it to look like a traditional college campus, like brick buildings and green grass? Big, small, public, private. We just talked about some of those things. A school, a college, becomes your home. It becomes more than academics. So what's the school that's not only going to support you with your career goals, but it's also going to help you still pursue your hobbies or passions? Do you sing? Do you play an instrument? Do you play a sport? Are you really active in community service? We want you to continue those passions in college, not give them up. So thinking about what's important to you there. What support do you need to be successful? Are you someone who maybe is on like an IEP plan or a 504 plan? Or maybe you are someone that stays after school and gets help, or really loves going to your teacher's Zoom office hours? You know, will the school support those things? And then ultimately, it's time to start talking about kind of what am I willing to pay to go to college? Full rides basically don't exist much anymore. So there's going to be some cost to attending a college or university. And that's an important conversation for your family to start having earlier rather than later. Once you've kind of talked through this in your brain, I'm going to have you do an activity. If you want me to email you this worksheet, I can. But this presentation is being recorded as well, so I'll make sure you get it. So you're going to basically list all of yours. So these are just a fake list, but you would list all those things that matter to you in step one, all the things that kind of come up. So I just listed some examples here. You might get a little more specific than this. Academic programs is really broad. You might say like a business program or an English program. But thinking through some of these things that matter to you. For some of you, none of these matter, right? Your list might be completely different, and that's okay. And this is where you get to be a little selfish. You're in control. So what matters to you might be very different than what matters to your best friend or even a parent or family member. So you're going to list them all. It's a free brainstorm period. I always joke when I get to do these in classes that you can put down anything. So people put down like school colors they like best, or that they want. I've had one student say he wanted a private chef. It's not going to happen in college, but this is step one. You get to put whatever you want in there. So you're going to list everything that comes to mind, take some time with this, have some fun with it, but also be serious. Think about what matters to you. And then you're going to go to step two. So you're going to narrow it down. You're going to pick 3 to 5 things that if a school didn't have, you just couldn't be successful or happy there. We can't fit all 100, but a college can say yes to 3 to 5. Excuse my dog if you can hear that. So you can narrow it down to 3 to 5. And then step 3 is the one I wish someone had helped me with. And that is create a question around each of those 5 things, so that if someone does say to you, like they said to me, do you have any questions? You have one, right? You have one you can pull out, ask every school, and then start to compare answers. So that way you're comparing schools and seeing which one's a good fit. And you've taken ownership of what questions you're asking. They're not taking ownership of what they're telling you. So for example, if you are someone who said in step 2, size is really important, I want a small school. Well, a question you could ask around that, a question I hear all the time, let's actually go this way, is like, what's your student to faculty ratio? And that means like how many students per faculty do you have on campus, right? It's making that ratio. I actually don't think that question gets at your answer, because there are really large schools that have so many faculty members hired that they can say they have a pretty small student faculty ratio. They can even say they have a pretty small average class size. So what I would ask is, what's your largest lecture hall on campus? Those are the places when faculty just talk at you. It's your largest classroom on campus, basically. And who uses it? What majors? Do freshmen use it? What classes are in there? Or maybe you would ask something like, what's your largest freshman class size? Or your average freshman class size? So you start to get a little bit narrower. So you're getting an answer that actually fits your interest. So this sometimes takes practice. You sometimes have to ask the question a few times. If anyone wants to try out a question on me, this is a great opportunity to drop those in the question and answer. Because if you're not getting the answer you're looking for, then maybe we have to rephrase that question. And I'm more than happy to help you with that. But you're going to come up with those questions so that way you have them kind of in your back pocket. So you're going to take those questions with you and you're going to do some research. And there are lots of ways for you to do research. I think this is the thing that if you have friends that are seniors right now, they didn't get a lot of this. And it made it really hard to research with some of the ways that we would normally do that. And I think I'm amazed by all of them that we're able to navigate this process in this virtual environment. For you, I'm hoping a few more of these things are back to normal in some ways, or maybe not normal, but at least available. And so you have college fairs, like that picture I showed you on the second screen, where you can go from table to table and just ask questions. We might not be able to have the big ones next year. They've already told us they won't, but we're probably gonna be able to have some smaller ones, maybe a school in your lunchroom, or maybe a mini college fair, that kind of thing. And you can ask those questions of someone like me. And I promise you, they're so excited to answer them. Every school has virtual engagement opportunities. We will be keeping those for the future just because we don't know, kind of what that looks like. So you can come in and talk to someone one-on-one or sit through an information session. You can visit campuses. Most of us are open and are accepting visitors. So that's something you can do. We have lots of visit opportunities in the summers. Your breaks tend to not be our breaks, so come and visit. Use your resources around you. So people you work with, community members. Do you have a teacher you really like? Where did they go to school? Have them talk to you about that. Your high school counselors are awesome. There's just lots and lots of places you can go and actually ask those questions. I actually put a few websites here that you can use to compare schools, and a lot of them have great information on it, almost too much information, but these are some of those websites that you can use to see, can I get in? How do students kind of rate different parts of that college campus? How do they compare against another school I'm looking at? So Big Future, niche.com, and capex.com. There's tons out there. Don't feel like these are the only 3 you can use. Those are just 3 that I know students I've worked with have used and found at least helpful just in the initial stages. So some final tips before I get into those questions. I recommend you make a new email address. Yes, I do. But that you also check it, but maybe only once a week or twice a week, because you're going to get lots of emails from colleges, from scholarships, from all sorts of things. And you want to make sure that you are maybe spending an hour a day or an hour a week kind of looking through those, deleting the ones or unsubscribing from the ones that you don't want, and kind of really keeping the other ones. Find some sort of system to organize them for you. So whether that's in a folder or some way that you're going to organize it, people let you know about scholarship opportunities, application deadlines. Those emails actually have helpful things in them. The colleges can also see if you opened it and if you read it. So if it's a school that you really want to go to, and maybe you're nervous about getting in, open their emails. They like to see that. But sometimes having a new email address kind of doesn't clog your inbox. You're going to get mail, lots of mail. I wish we had hands raisers. You could all tell me how much mail you're already getting. But that means the school sees something in you. They purchased your name. Yes, purchased it, basically so they could send you stuff because you fit criteria that they're looking for, as little as they know about you. Sort it, recycle it, keep some of it. Again, if you unsubscribe from emails, you tend to get off their mailing list as well. So you can take some ownership over that sorting process. But look at some you've never heard of before and see if you learn something interesting. Take ownership. I would say that a bunch of times, but the ball is in your court. So you get to decide where to apply and you ultimately get to decide where to go. But you should separate those two decisions. You're not thinking about where you're going yet. You're just thinking about where you're applying. So you're trying to create that application list, but make it about you. Be a little bit selfish again in this process. And yes, you can get in. Fewer than 100 colleges in the US are highly selective. Which means they accept less than 25% of their applicants. So most schools are accepting more than that. You can actually find out. You can say, you can Google whatever college name, acceptance rate. It's the first thing that comes up. So Google will tell you. And then this says see your chances. And this takes you to, I believe, niche.com, which is the one that will show you your chances of being accepted. And then control what you can and don't worry about the rest. So one of my tips is consider skipping the ACT and SAT if it's giving you anxiety. Now it's over like 1,600 colleges in the nation are test optional, which means they don't care. Turn it in if you want, don't turn it in if you don't want, not too bad. I think every school in Washington is test optional. So this is just something that good for you. Previous generations really stressed out about. I would normally be encouraging you to take this exam. I'm telling you to consider skipping it. Go beyond the virtual campus tour. So actually do some of those visits where you get to engage with someone and ask your questions. Step foot on a college campus if you're comfortable. Don't just sit around in the summer. You know, we like to see somebody who maybe got a job or volunteered or even just did something for yourself, right? Started running and ran a 5K, taught themselves to play guitar, so that you are, finding something to take your time. But also use your summer to start applying for scholarships, looking for scholarships, developing a system of how you're going to track all of these dates, deadlines, and process. Make your senior year relevant. So you've already signed up for classes, I know, or at least I think you have. So, take classes that maybe you don't have to, but that still push you, especially your math and your English. Those are classes that a lot of schools really like to see that you continue into your senior year. And then do know, and we will talk a ton more about this in the fall, but every application has a community disruption section or an other information section, where if you want to talk about how COVID-19 has disrupted your education, your transcript, we will have that opportunity for you to do that. So that is something you will be able to talk about. Anything that happened this year or last spring, should not impact your ability to go to college. It just means you may have to share some of that with us. All right, so that's a lot of information that I went over, but I am going to take questions, so throw them down in the Q&A for me. All my contact information is on here. I am open to talking to you about PLU or just college in general, so definitely never hesitate to email me or call or text. I'd love to connect with you before next year. And then, like I said, your counselors and I are talking about some like essay writing workshops, financial aid and scholarship workshops, those kind of things for next year that'll dive deeper into some of the subject matter when you're maybe a little bit more ready to hear all of that. And then we are doing a special presentation for first generation students in a couple weeks where we will kind of break this down even more and talk a little bit about what that means. So I'm going to look at my Q&A for a second, see if there's anything in there. None of you have questions. That's so surprising. Trying to think if there's anything I forgot before I let you go. I'm happy you all stuck with me on this lovely evening. That is so great. There's a few of you in here. All right. Well, if no one has questions, you're going to get out a little early, which is fine. Like I said, I'm recording this session, so I will make sure to get it to your counselors as soon as I can. So you can watch it or send it to someone else. And we will hopefully get to see each other or meet each other at some point soon. But I know I'll be connecting with some of you virtually in the near future. So thanks for coming on this Monday night.